Thank you. Let me just add how much of a privilege it is to be sharing the stage with such eminent scholars. It was a particular thrill to be accused of humility at the beginning of this session by Neville. I will take that home and share that with my wife, if nothing else, from this conference. I'd like to make a very small contribution at this point from my own tradition, in particularly that of Catholic social teaching, which I know a number of you will be familiar with already. But in thinking about the recent event, of course, of the meeting of the Group of 20, the G20, it's obvious, I think, to us that the group represents the financial interests of 20 major economies of the world. Such a group meets on the predication that they have mutual economic interests that largely rest, and there are various interpretations of this amongst those 20, but largely rests on various ideas of free trade and some form of liberalised market forces, or at least some combination of liberalised market forces in relation to other domestic and international dimensions of the economy. As such, it is a forum for the wealthy and the powerful in some respects, and certainly in all respects in which significant portions of the world's population has a stake. What I think is clear is that religion is not at the heart of the motivation for the meeting, although I note various references to it, such as President Obama's rhetorical commitment to religious liberty. So it's not part of the motivation for the meeting to begin with, although, as my esteemed colleague here said, it was the elephant in the room at times. However, in many G8 countries, there are trends against religious liberty in evidence, and the engagement of religious practitioners in such economies is a topic worthy of strong consideration. I'd like to suggest that people and organisations with faith commitments have a pre-existent tension when faced with the involvement in the commercial and not an economic marketplace. So there's already a tension before they even enter the economic marketplace. In my own Catholic social tradition, we have a developed and still developing set of principles and documents, what we refer to generally as Catholic social teaching, which indicates ways in which faith might direct social and economic practices within the world. And indeed, contrary to, I think, the reasons for the G20, actually act as a motivation for acting in the world. I'd like to briefly highlight three. In the tradition of good academic practice, I'm highlighting three aspects of Catholic social teaching, which I think might be broadly applied to other religious traditions as well. But I don't want to make any assumptions about that, and I'm interested to hear other people's perspectives. The first is that faced with economic possibilities and economic challenges, the language of human dignity is not just important, but it derives from something outside of our own thinking, of our own thoughts, our own documents, our own traditions, our own philosophies. For the Catholic tradition, human dignity derives chiefly from God. So in words from Gaudium et Spes, a document from the Second Vatican Council, I quote section 190 there, "The root reason for human dignity lies in man's call to communion with God." End quote. Second, Catholic social teaching does not only consider our hopes and aspirations for the future, but the real calamities and sufferings of people in the present moment. There was reference made before to the other. I would highlight particularly the suffering other. In Rerum Novarum, one of the earliest church documents in what we call Catholic social teaching from 1891 from Pope Leo XIII, we have these words: "Broken in spirit and worn down in body, how many of them would gladly free themselves from such galling bondage?" I think we have an echo from Leo XIII in some of the language of Pope Francis in today's setting, in which the social tradition, largely derived from religious faith, is interested in looking clearly at present suffering in the economic context and in the social context, and feels at liberty to express that concern, that outrage, how galling the language goes. At that stage, I should say, in 1891, that was very uncommon language for a papal encyclical. This was expressive language. The third, and I think this point relates particularly to a range of religious traditions now and many who practice their faith, is that when we look at the economic and the social context, particularly in countries like Australia and countries in the West, we with their neighbours and to go to great lengths to avoid talking about politics. Okay, that's not unusual. We pride ourselves as a country in avoiding politics. But when we do, the common language is, well, we can't trust any of these politicians and none of them represent me anyway. Okay, that's a common sort of language that we use. But I think particularly from a religious perspective, it's very, very easy to identify a certain homelessness for that religious social perspective on the political divide, trying to find a particular political point of view that represents you on the basis of your religion and your commitment to faith. And this has become something that I think is quite common. So these three things I just wish to highlight in this brief opening word. The first is that human dignity in the economic and social context does not derive from ourselves, but from outside of ourselves in God. The second is that we feel free because of our faith to express our concern and outrage, that there are those who suffer in what Pope Francis refers to the peripheries in our social and economic context. But the third is that we have a perspective that is somewhat homeless in the political spectrum that is given to us, from which we are called to choose. So I'll leave that there, and I'm looking forward very much to hearing other contributions. Thank you very much.